Often regarded as one of the most vast wilderness areas in the United States, Mount Hood and the surrounding forests are no strangers to hikers, fishermen, and campers going missing. On July 12, 2010, Robert Perry Bissell would step out of his home in Portland, Oregon to camp and fish near the Rock Lakes area of the Mount Hood National Forest, planning on returning on July 15th. That was the last time he was ever seen. However, rumors of fishermen being run out of the area by an unidentified creature persist to this day. I'm Jaster with the Southeast Bigfoot Research Organization, and tonight we're demystifying the missing persons case of Robert Bissell. Now, in order to understand what might have happened to Robert over 15 years ago, you have to first look at the area in which he disappeared. Mount Hood National Forest is considered to be one of the largest wilderness areas in the United States, coming in at over 1,600 square miles, and features over 1,000 miles of trails, 8 different wilderness areas, and an elevation range of 800 to 11,239 feet. And as far as American wilderness goes, it's about as thick as it gets. Especially if you're a returning viewer of the show, we like to get into the geography of the area. It was one of the most remote areas of the park, Middle Rock Lake, where Robert set up his camp. And from what can be gathered by members of his family, Robert had wanted to spend time out in the area to relax and fish, and his brother Michael would keep an eye out for him and keep tabs on him while he was out on his trip. On July 19th, a week after Robert had initially gone camping, his brother went down to his campsite to check in on him. However, what he discovered was an empty campsite, with Robert's sleeping bag and gear still located at the camp. Now, what he did next is they just took out a note, said, "Hey, contact me when you get back here, we're just checking in on you." Sometime later, Michael had come back, and the campsite was exactly how he had left it. And that is at this point that the authorities were contacted and a search was launched the following day. Now, the search itself lasted until August 3rd and consisted of Clackamas County, Yamhill County, and Clark County search and rescue teams, and they were rather well equipped. And as well as that, they also had the American Red Cross's Oregon Trail chapter come in order to help provide food for the searchers. And it wasn't long until Bissell's car had been recovered. Now, we expect that the car's location was generally well known by the search team and the family, seeing how nowhere in the news or reports does the car appear to have been missing in the eyes of the authorities. His car is reported as being about 5 miles away from his camp, with the car being near Trail 700 and the camp itself being located near Trail 512 near Middle Rock Lake. Now, police had interviewed a couple of hikers during this investigation, and apparently a couple of them had talked to Robert before he had disappeared. They had come in contact with him before he had gone too far down the trail towards the lake, which doesn't really help too much with the investigation because of the relative proximity to his campsite. Now, according to them, Robert made the comment about how overgrown the area had become and set off towards the lake to go out and fish. This backs up all of the evidence that they had gathered so far that he had basically left with just his fishing rod and his tackle box. Now, these guys were the actual last people to see Robert Bissell alive. Now, this is where the rumors start to go and get crazy. So, one of the things that got us curious enough about this case in order to start looking into it on our own is how embroiled in Bigfoot culture Mount Hood is, and the rumors of the fishermen being chased out of the area like 2 weeks prior by a Bigfoot-like creature, as well as a long history of Bigfoot sightings in the area. Now, if you head over to the Bigfoot Mapping Project, it's pretty easy to get lost in the sea of pins that cover the Mount Hood area. And if you listen to this case from the Missing 411 part of the Bigfoot world, it's kind of implied that something strange is afoot in these woods, and that might have something to do with it. So we decided to look into it and see what we could find. Now, to get the big one out of the way, the rumors that fishermen were out in the area and they had been run out by a Bigfoot-like creature cannot be substantiated. There's no reports that corroborate this account on any Bigfoot reporting database. Now, That does not mean that it could have just went unreported. However, we cannot substantiate that claim. However, in 2020, a U.S. Forest Service ranger reported into the Pacific Northwest Bigfoot search an encounter where him and two others were camping at the end of Fraser Mountain Road, which is one of the only access roads into this area. And it was there on the second or third night that they had come across what they thought to have been a bear near their camp, so they shot out into the air to make it go away. And later that night, they started to hear whoops and yells, chattering. It sounded like something was trying to talk to something else in the woods. And then they were getting three trees thrown at them that were about a foot in diameter. Now, this man prefers to remain anonymous as he still works in the U.S. Forest Service and does not want to change his career. Now, that happened in 2020. What do we have that goes on further back? We don't really have much as far as the Bigfoot mapping project goes. The databases like the Bigfoot Research Organization database and other ones in the area like the Pacific Northwest Bigfoot search. I'm really not doing good with my names today. So, where can we go from here? It was at this point I contacted the North American Bigfoot Center in Boring, Oregon. Now, this is in Clackamas County as well, and it's curated by Cliff Barackman, who anybody that really is into Bigfoot knows that he's part of a lot of big TV productions with Bigfoot, mostly like Monster Quest, Finding Bigfoot, the Alaska Triangle, Bigfoot Beyond the Trail, if you're into YouTube, a lot of things. Now, these guys are a great group. Thankfully, they were willing to hear me out, and I was able to talk with Dave, who's the manager of the museum, and we had a really pleasant conversation. Now, we were talking about Bigfoot sightings in the Mount Hood area, but we were trying to look more specifically around the Rock Lakes area. What's important to note here is that these guys researched the entire Mount Hood area, but also that they're able to focus their manpower on a more localized area, unlike the BFRO, who have volunteers spread all over the United States, and these guys have to cover large territories. The manager at the museum was kind enough to look into their unpublished database, to look into our requests, so basically everything that they had. Now, they were not able to find anything. These guys are the local regional authority on Bigfoot, and there are no reported sightings that match the description during that time. In fact, there are no Bigfoot sightings in that part of Mount Hood anywhere near the time that Robert Bissell went missing. Now, years back beforehand, they had some stuff. Years afterward, they had some things. But nothing near the actual time frame of the disappearance. And that kind of speaks to me, because like if the people that are collecting everything that they can get boots on the ground can't hear anything about it, it's probably not true. Now, like I said, this could be somebody having an experience and then not reporting it and never coming forward. But like I said, it's kind of hard to have an experience like that and be so close to somebody like these people and not come forward in some sort of way. So, Dave went on to clarify a few things as well. Now, him and his team being boots on the ground researchers, he can attest to the area in which Robert Bissell went missing is considered to be the most remote place in Mount Hood National Forest. There's not a lot of access to this area, and according to him, there's really only one access road heading into that part of the park. Then it takes an additional 5 miles to walk through heavily forested terrain in order to get to the Rock Lakes Basin by way of the trailhead. Now, while they have received reports from that area, even going back as far as 1994, the area is so remote and hard to access that they struggle to put boots on the ground themselves. So, at the end of the day, what do we got here? There's a few things that went wrong that didn't give Robert Bissell a very good chance in the first place. Now, first, It's rough that it took almost 2 weeks for the full search effort to start. It's mostly due to it taking almost a week to declare him as a missing person. Then it took an additional 5 days for search and rescue teams to set up a search and rescue operation in the area. Now, anytime someone is lost out in the woods, as it's obvious that they left most of their gear at camp, like I said, he only took his fishing rod and his tackle box, time is of the essence. Sometimes the weather conditions can help you out. It didn't seem like there was a lot going on as far as adverse weather with this. I could be mistaken, but access to fresh water is another big part of it. Now, with him being so close to the lakes, access to fresh water does help. The other thing is that the area that Robert went missing is a place only few people in the park really frequent. So it took longer for people to realize that things weren't right, if they did at all. Only Michael raised the alarm, so we gotta assume that no one else really saw anything suspicious, or they didn't come forward, or they weren't interviewed by police. We can also posit from the lack of the FBI presence in the area that foul play was not suspected in his disappearance or the investigation that followed. Now, where the rumors of being run off by Bigfoot are concerned, seeing how there's no printed record of such an encounter, not in the newspapers, not in the Bigfoot database, we have to conclude that they were either unreported or didn't happen. Now, as a Kentucky man myself, I'm more familiar with tales of grim supernatural occurrences happening to campers at night, and all the horror tales that happen with that. Like, just look at the Beast of LBL. However, between not being able to find additional evidence of these sightings prior to his disappearance, now I'm talking like 2 weeks prior to his disappearance, and the lack of any evidence to point towards foul play, we're pretty comfortable in saying that this case is more than likely explained by more ordinary circumstances rather than supernatural ones. It's important to note that Robert was 57, and although he was someone who enjoyed the great outdoors, any number of things can happen to a solo camper, especially when you get up in that age range. Outside of a medical event, I'm going to have to bring up my conversation with Dave at the North American Bigfoot Center again. The area is of the most remote and rugged sort that you can find in the entire park. Unfortunately, anything can happen when you're out that far into the wilderness, and without any sort of locator beacon or distress signaling device, things can happen faster than you can process, and with no way of alerting someone that something happened. Now, we hope that if you stayed until this point, that you got something out of the video. This is definitely new kind of content for us, and hopefully you guys like it. If so, please let us know. If you got anything to discuss in the comments, please do so. We love to have discussions out here. And if you want to, please share us with your Bigfoot friends. We want to try and properly disseminate information that goes throughout the Bigfoot community. So please let us know if we're doing a good job. My name's Jaster with the Southeast Bigfoot Research Organization, and you all have a wonderful night. Bye-bye.